Previously on the story, Pei Lang secretly returns to the temple in the outskirts of the capital, only to be discovered by Sheng Jiaoyue. To prevent Sheng Jiaoyue from reporting this to his family and stirring up unnecessary trouble, Wei Jing forces him to share a carriage ride back to the city. Already unwell, Sheng Jiaoyue is further pressed by Wei Jing to read aloud a romantic story about same-sex relationships during the journey. Upon arriving in the capital, Sheng Jiaoyue is forcibly detained at the Crown Prince's residence. What thrilling events will unfold between the two next? Stay tuned. Chapter 9. The spacious carriage stopped at the detached courtyard built by the Crown Prince outside the palace. Pushing open the partition window, the mist rising in the evening rushed towards one's face. Wei Jing's eyes were fixed on the young man's face that was gradually turning pale. Sometimes he found it rather strange that the legitimate son of the eldest branch of the Sheng family had been brought up with such a cowardly and irresponsible character, as timid as a mouse and clinging to life at the slightest sign of danger. Sheng Jiaoyue's hands were hidden in her sleeves. Her fingernails dug into her palms. A touch of paleness appeared on her palm-sized face. Her frail and thin figure was already on the verge of collapsing. Her eyelashes with glistening water droplets trembled slightly. The waves of pain in her lower abdomen forced watery light into her eyes. She forced back her tears, clenched her teeth, and took a deep breath.
Your Highness, it's probably against the rules to stay overnight in your residence.
Wei Jing hadn't expected that he would refuse. Staring at him, his pupil color gradually darkened. Sheng Jiaoyue had tried every means to get close to him and had done things to please him more than once or twice, longing to become one of his confidants. Letting him stay in the detached courtyard for one night should have been exactly what he wished for. Instead of having such intense resistance as now. Wei Jing usually seemed easy to talk to, but he also hated being disobeyed very much.
Which rule does it go against?
Sheng Jiaoyue lowered her eyes, thought for a moment, and then spat out 4 outrageous words.
Forming cliques for private gain.
Wei Jing almost laughed. His waist lazily leaned against the cushion behind him. He looked at him with a half-smile.
You haven't become an official yet. How can it be considered forming cliques for private gain?
Sheng Jiaoyue was left speechless by the interrogation. She knew that if she continued to decline, she would surely arouse the Crown Prince's suspicion. This man was deep-minded, cunning, and suspicious. With the slightest carelessness, she would end up in prison, just like in her previous life. Wei Jing completely lost his patience. His sharp phoenix eyes coldly swept across his face. His eyes were deep, majestic, and solemn, and it was hard to tell his emotions.
Get off the carriage.
Outside the carriage, there were 2 solemn columns of imperial guards on duty. Sheng Jiaoyue got off the carriage carefully, feeling uneasy all the time. She felt as if there was blood on her clothes, so she put on her cloak again, and only then did she feel at ease. Suddenly, a clear and bright voice came from not far away from the courtyard gate.
Prince Cousin. You're finally back.
This voice belonged to Princess Xinghua. The princess was 14 years old this year, at the age of cardamom. She had a small, round face that was cute and harmless, with bright eyes and white teeth, lively and cheerful. Wei Jing knitted his brows and took 2 steps back. Princess Xinghua shook off her family servants and ran out. She had adored her prince cousin since she was a child. Her childhood wish was to marry her cousin, become his crown princess, and later his empress. Wei Jing knitted his brows.
Where are your attendants?
Princess Xinghua stammered and couldn't come up with an answer for quite a while. The little girl was still afraid of being scolded, so she hung her head low, kept silent, attempting to get away with it. Wei Jing summoned Xing Kuan.
Have someone escort Princess Xinghua back to the mansion.
Yes.
Princess Xinghua refused to leave and ran around the carriage in circles. When she was exhausted and couldn't run any further, she suddenly grasped Sheng Jiaoyue's arm, regarding him as a life-saving straw.
Cousin, I miss you.
Sheng Jiaoyue felt that her sleeve was almost being torn off by the princess. Her face flushed. She carefully tried to break free from the princess's hand. Suddenly, the crown prince fixed his gaze on her hand like 2 sharp blades. She then remembered that it was improper for men and women to have physical contact. Sheng Jiaoyue blushed and said in a low voice,
Princess, please release my hand first.
The princess let go of her and was immediately taken away by the imperial guards and pushed into the carriage. Before leaving, she opened the window and waved to her cousin reluctantly but with great enthusiasm.
Cousin, I'll come to see you in 2 days.
Sheng Jiaoyue stared at the departing carriage with a dazed look. After a while, she lowered her head to tidy up her lapel. The faint melancholy in her heart lingered. She was a bit envious of Princess Xinghua. Wei Jing was very kind to Princess Xinghua, extremely doting, gentle, and polite. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he didn't hold a draft due to the need to observe propriety. However, when he was still the crown prince, his harem was not empty. Although he wasn't lustful, he treated the female members of the harem quite well. He was fair in rewards and punishments. The new emperor was only cruel to her. He confined her in the bedchamber and didn't allow her to take a single step out. He also often liked to be intimate with her in inappropriate situations. He merely regarded her as a bedmate for venting his anger. Wei Jing looked at him, who was lost in thought silently, and was displeased. He called the person over with a cold face and sneered softly.
Master Sheng, the carriage has already gone far. What are you still looking at?
Reluctant to part, staring at his cousin, Sheng Jiaoyue withdrew her gaze.
I was being impolite.
Wei Jing dropped a hint intentionally or unintentionally, and his voice turned slightly cold.
The princess is only 14 and still young.
Sheng Jiaoyue didn't understand what the crown prince intended to convey for a moment. To avoid saying something wrong, she remained silent and waited to see what would happen. Wei Jing stopped there. He didn't even take a look at his own frail body. He was thin, timid, and sickly. It was still a question whether he could survive until the wedding night. The detached courtyard is exquisitely elegant, with winding corridors and terraces. Wei Jing had a guest room arranged for Sheng Jiaoyue. In the courtyard, there is a shallow pool where a school of red koi carp are raised. It was a birthday gift presented by the Minister of Rites on the Crown Prince's previous birthday. They have survived for many years. Sheng Jiaoyue had endured for most of the day, and the cold sweat had already soaked the back of her nightgown. She was led into the guest room by a maidservant. Before dismissing the maidservant, she asked for some hot water and hot tea. The maidservant closed the door behind her as she left and then made her way to the study in the main courtyard. Having received the order, the maidservant kept her head bowed low. She dared not look up as she entered the study. She reported in accordance with the protocol.
Your Highness, Master Sheng requested some hot water and then shut himself in the room and hasn't come out.
The study was quiet and desolate. The maidservant's knees grew sore from kneeling. After a long while, she heard the cold voice of His Highness the Crown Prince asking,
Did he say anything else?
Nothing.
Keep an eye on him.
Yes.
The door closed once again. Wei Jing completed the final stroke of the calligraphy. He curved his lips into a smile. Hot water? Sheng Jiaoyue might have died of cold in his previous life. He was more sensitive to the cold than a girl. A hand warmer had to be prepared for him wherever he went. Suddenly, the extremely beautiful and glamorous face of Sheng Jiaoyue with his rosy lips and pearly teeth flashed into Wei Jing's mind. When he pressed his thin red lips together and wore a meticulous expression, he looked aloof and cold. If that delicate face, which was more charming than a painting, was adorned with makeup, it would add a touch of voluptuous allure. His dark, glistening eyes were pitiful and innocent. Wei Jing closed his eyes and forcefully threw down the writing brush. The jade pen holder was shattered by his strength, and the clinking sound brought the man back to his senses a little. He opened his eyes again and had regained his composure. After the maidservant reported back, she went to the kitchen to prepare hot water and then delivered tea to the guest room one after another. Sheng Jiaoyue sipped half a pot of hot water while holding the cup. The incessant cramps in her stomach eased a bit. She had a cold constitution and usually had to take medicine to regulate it during her menstrual period. She had to stay in bed for 2 days to recover. This time she couldn't take any medicine and could only endure it with gritted teeth. And currently, she has a major headache. She needs to change her menstrual cloth, and figuring out how to clean the used one is also a tough problem. After all, Sheng Jiaoyue has lived 2 lifetimes and has a reasonable understanding of the Crown Prince. There must be someone spying on her every move outside the guest room. After thinking for a while, Sheng Jiaoyue asked the maidservant for 2 sets of spare clothes and the undergarments. She then cut the snow-white nightgown into long strips and clumsily made several makeshift but usable menstrual cloths. At night, Sheng Jiaoyue took a bath in the bathtub. When no one was around, she threw the used menstrual cloth into the brazier and burned it to ashes. The day after the Crown Prince returned to the capital from the Qianxi temple, the area around the temple was surrounded by the imperial guards so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak through. The guards came in full force and searched every single room. They searched every nook and cranny inside and out, but failed to find the so-called fugitive. 2 days later, the palace guards retreated. Elder Zhang led the guards to leave the Qianxi temple. In the dusky evening, Elder Zhang got off the carriage. Suddenly, a corpse fell heavily from above his head. The corpse had been torn apart by 5 horses. Its eye sockets were empty and pitch black. The ears and tongue had been cut off. Blood was gushing from all 7 orifices. The death was truly gruesome. Elder Zhang's face turned deathly pale. He staggered back a few steps. Fortunately, the old butler supported his arm, preventing him from falling to the ground. His chest was heaving violently. Whether it was out of fright or anger, he closed his eyes and said coldly,
"Send the corpse to the yamen. Quick!"
Yes, yes, yes.
Sheng Jiaoyue was unaware of this incident. After sleeping for a night, her lower abdomen still ached severely. At noon, the maidservant came to invite her to have a meal in the main courtyard. Sheng Jiaoyue's face was pale and she looked dispirited. She sat in front of the bronze mirror with a solemn expression. Since she didn't know how to do her hair herself, her smooth and silky long black hair as fine as satin cascaded down to her knees. She simply tied her long hair at the back of her head with a wooden comb before going out. The maidservant led the way in front and didn't notice Master Sheng's hairstyle. Otherwise, she would surely have helped him redo it. Sheng Jiaoyue wasn't particularly fond of having a meal with the Crown Prince. She knew several of His Highness the Crown Prince's strange idiosyncrasies. He used to like to hold her on his lap and feed her. He wouldn't allow her to be fussy about food. He also gave her an unflattering and demeaning nickname.
Little sparrow. My little sparrow. If you dare to think of running away again, I will break both your ankles, pass a chain through the bones and lock you to the bed so that you can never escape in your life.
When the new emperor whispered these terrifying words in her ear, there was a faint smile at the corners of his beautiful eyes. He always liked to scare her and enjoyed seeing her pitiful state of trembling and cowering in his arms, too afraid to make a sound. He liked her to please him piteously, just as she had done before. After passing through the corridor, they arrived at the main courtyard. The maidservants had already set out the hot dishes. The Crown Prince didn't like to be served by too many people, so he dismissed them. He slightly raised his eyes and asked the young man to sit in the empty seat beside him. Sheng Jiaoyue didn't have much appetite. Looking at the table of food, she reluctantly picked up her chopsticks and ate the stir-fried pork with winter bamboo shoots in front of her first. The bamboo shoots and meat were tender and smooth, and melted in the mouth. After she finished eating, she found that the Crown Prince was staring straight at her. She was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly realized that the Crown Prince hadn't started eating yet. How could she eat first? It was also her fault that she had been thinking about things from her previous life these days, and had let her guard down. Sheng Jiaoyue slowly put down her chopsticks and felt restless. Wei Jing said meaningfully,
Master Sheng, eat more and gain some weight.
so as not to be blown away by the wind. Sheng Jiaoyue bit her cherry lips lightly and replied in a voice so low that it could hardly be heard.
Okay.
Wei Jing really couldn't bear to see his docile appearance with lowered eyebrows. He was too timid. What did he look like? Could it be that he would really become a plaything in the bed of a powerful minister in the future? With his delicate and precious body that couldn't bear hardships, he was afraid that he would cry all his tears out on the bed in his lifetime. He had only seen Sheng Jiaoyue once when he was on the verge of crying. He was both pitiful and charming. After lunch, Sheng Jiaoyue couldn't wait to take her leave. Wei Jing told him to stop.
Why are you in such a hurry to leave?
Sheng Jiaoyue pretended to be deaf and mute when she couldn't answer. In this life, she would never get close to the terrifying Crown Prince again no matter what. She could only escape from him to avoid future disasters. The door of the compartment was half open, and suddenly a gust of wind blew up in the yard. The loose hairband on her bun was blown up by the wind, and her long, lazy, thick, and jet black hair spread out slowly like a painting. The wooden hairpin in her bun fell to the ground. There was a hint of surprise in her eyes, and she subconsciously reached out to touch the wooden hairpin at the back of her head, but only touched empty air. The loose strands of hair in the air were like spilled ink. Wei Jing's gaze froze. The young man in front of him looked panicked. His delicate and jade-like face showed a look of panic. His lips were slightly parted, and his lip color was moist and red. His almond-shaped eyes were filled with a watery glimmer, and he let out a short and startled cry. He hurriedly bent down, picked up the hairband and the wooden hairpin, and quickly tied up her black hair. Pretending to be calm, he took a slight breath and said in a trembling voice,
I'm sorry to have made your Highness laugh.
Wei Jing's voice was hoarser than he had expected. He remained expressionless, and his Adam's apple slid smoothly twice. He said in a hoarse voice,
It doesn't matter.
The man's eyes were unfathomable, staring intently at his face, as if a cold and venomous snake had targeted its prey. Wei Jing thought carelessly that he had underestimated his studied companion. He was truly extremely beautiful. Being a man, he didn't know whether it was a pity or a blessing. With such a beautiful face, if he were a woman, he would only have the fate of being a caged canary in the boudoir. Next chapter preview, Sheng Jiaoyue is forced into an archery contest with Pei Lang. To everyone's surprise, Crown Prince Wei Jing personally teaches Sheng Jiaoyue how to draw the bow, with their close and intimate postures leaving Sheng Jiaoyue blushing furiously. After the contest, Pei Lang suggests they visit the hot springs, setting the stage for an intriguing turn of events. What will happen next? Will Sheng Jiaoyue's secret disguise be exposed? Stay tuned for the upcoming chapters, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more updates.